I want to start by asking you an uncomfortable question. How many times have you felt like you had to explain everything, even things no one should be asking you about? In old age, it seems like the world thinks it has the right to know about your money, your health, your plans, your beliefs, even your most intimate pains. And if you don't answer, they call you cold or distant. But let me tell you something. Sometimes being cold isn't a lack of love. It's the wisest way to protect your peace and your dignity. I'm Gabriel, and I've spent more than 15 years studying and practicing Stoicism as a philosophy of life. I've guided hundreds of people along this path of learning to live with wisdom, virtue, and above all, courage. I've seen how, in later life, many people carry an unnecessary burden, the pressure to answer questions that lead nowhere good. Questions that, though they may seem harmless, can reopen wounds, spark conflicts, or expose vulnerabilities that should stay locked away. Today, I want to walk you through 9 specific situations where silence or a cold response may be your greatest act of self-love. This isn't about being harsh with others, but about being clear with yourself. Because in the end, you don't have to justify every detail of your life just to please others. Through practical philosophy, everyday examples, and a touch of humor, we're going to go through these uncomfortable questions so you can learn to recognize them, handle them, and above all, keep them from stealing your serenity. Let's begin. Number 1. How much money do you have? If there's one question you should freeze in the air before answering, it's this one. Money is as delicate as crystal in the hands of someone who doesn't know how to handle it. What's curious is that the older we get, the more people seem to think they have the right to ask how much we've saved, what we spend on, or who we plan to leave it to. But answering with numbers, details, or plans is like opening your front door to whoever happens to walk by. Suddenly everyone has an opinion, everyone gives advice, everyone expects something. And the most dangerous part, some start calculating how to benefit from it. I learned this the hard way. Years ago at a family dinner, someone suddenly asked me, "So how much have you saved up?" It was uncomfortable, like being asked to strip right there at the table. I dodged the question, but what stuck with me most was the anxiety I felt. Because if I had said anything, it would have fueled comparisons, judgments, and expectations. That day I understood I don't owe financial explanations to anyone, except to those who truly need them. Stoicism teaches us the importance of distinguishing between what depends on us and what doesn't. Your money, your accounts, your financial decisions, they depend on you. But what others think you should spend or save does not. And here's the key. Virtue lies in prudence, in knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. In this case, silence isn't selfishness. It's protecting your peace. Think of your money as a locked chest. It doesn't matter if inside there are copper coins or bars of gold, it's still yours. And it doesn't need to be displayed to have value. Showing it only creates noise, envy, or false friendships. And believe me, when someone insists on knowing what you have, it's never innocent curiosity. They're already running calculations that won't favor you. There's a very practical technique I call the fog bank. It's about giving soft, vague answers that don't open the door to more questions. For example, "I get by just fine with what I have," or "I only talk about that with my advisor." It's an elegant way to protect yourself without confrontation. Sometimes even a touch of humor helps. Enough to buy myself a coffee and keep chatting with you here. The point isn't to get upset, but to avoid giving away information that could put you at risk. Here's an exercise. Draw 3 concentric circles on a piece of paper. In the center, write "me." In the next circle, write the people who have access to certain information about you. In the outer circle, write the rest of the world. Now ask yourself, in which circle do you place your financial information? If you're wise, that information will stay in the center, with very restricted access. When you answer this kind of question with calmness and coolness, you'll be defending more than just your money. You'll be defending your independence. And independence in old age is not a luxury, it's a vital necessity. So remember, your money is yours. Your silence is your shield, and your peace is worth more than any number written in a bank book. Number 2, what medication do you take and what exactly hurts? Here we step onto slippery ground. Health is as intimate as your own breathing, yet in old age it seems everyone feels entitled to ask about your pills, your diagnoses, and your pains. Sometimes they ask with good intentions, sometimes out of sheer curiosity, and often to use that information against you, even if they don't admit it. Answering in detail is like opening a window through which criticism, unsolicited advice, and, worst of all, the victim label you don't need will inevitably enter. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're at a gathering, and someone asks, "So, what medications are you on now?" You answer honestly, listing those complicated pill names, and immediately someone says, "Oh, that's bad for you. You should stop taking it." Another chimes in with the miracle cure they saw on YouTube. Suddenly, your life becomes a public debate, and you're stuck between justifying yourself and defending the treatment you and your doctor already decided on. Is it worth it? Number. I once met a lady who shared her diagnoses with everyone. Every phone call with her friends turned into a medical report. The result? Everyone saw her as the sick one. What struck me most was that she no longer spoke of herself as a person, only as a patient. And that's the real danger. When you overshare, you let your identity shrink down to your ailments. You are not your list of medications. You are so much more than that. The Stoics taught that pain is inevitable, but suffering ahead of time is a choice. And when you hand over your medical intimacy on a silver platter, you open the door to the unnecessary suffering brought on by other people's opinions. It's one thing to share enough so someone can understand you or support you in an emergency, and quite another to deliver every detail of your body as if you were accountable to others. A practical technique you can use is the pocket ritual. Prepare a short, neutral phrase ahead of time, something like, "I'm in treatment and I'm feeling better, thanks for asking." With that, you close the conversation without leaving room for further intrusions. Another option is visualization. Imagine your health as a secret garden. You only let in those who will truly help you care for it, not the curious wanderers who just want to stroll around and criticize the flowers. Remember, too, that there's a difference between honesty and excessive vulnerability. Honesty belongs in trust. Poorly managed vulnerability turns into gossip, and you don't need to be the dinner table topic for your family or your neighborhood. Protecting your privacy in matters of health doesn't mean being cold, it means being wise. Your body deserves respect, your story deserves discretion, and your life does not need to be an open file for everyone's commentary. So next time someone insists, "What hurts?" think carefully whether you really owe them that answer, or if a kind silence and a serene smile will do. Number 3. Who are you leaving your things to? This question is a bomb disguised as curiosity. The moment someone asks it, the atmosphere shifts. Eyes tighten, ears sharpen, and everyone waits for your answer as if it were a verdict. Talking about inheritance at the family table is like opening a box of dynamite in the middle of the room. And yet, once we reach a certain age, many think it's natural to pressure you into publicly declaring what you'll leave, to whom, and in what proportion. I've seen families split apart over a single careless phrase said in a moment of weakness. A father once confided, "I think I'll leave more to your sister because she visits me more often." That sentence turned into years of rivalry, resentment, and endless arguments. The sad part is that, in the end, what remains isn't love or gratitude, but unfinished business and emotional wounds. That's why I say, never answer this question in the heat of the moment, and especially not in front of others. Stoicism teaches that justice isn't about meeting others' expectations. It's about what you decide with calmness and integrity. And when it comes to inheritance, that justice is best expressed on a signed document, not in improvised conversations. Clarity belongs in private and through formal channels, not in whispers and rumors. A practice I often recommend is what I call the private decisions notebook. There, in peace and quiet, you can write down how you'd like to arrange your belongings and keepsakes without having to share it right away. It's a space where you can think calmly, reflect, make changes over time, and keep control without pressure from anyone. That way you decide instead of reacting. Let me share a short parable. An old man gathered his 3 children and told them, The most valuable thing I have won't fit in a will because it isn't land or coins. It's the example I gave you by the way I lived." His children fell silent, realizing that no material inheritance could ever replace the lesson of an upright life. The moral is clear. Love is shown while you're alive, and inheritance, when the time comes, should be settled, but never become a cause for conflict. Let me pause here for a moment. If what you've heard so far resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments what country you're watching from. I'd love to know. And if you feel these reflections speak to you, give this video a like. That way you help this message reach more people who, like you, are looking to live with wisdom at this stage of life. Back to our topic. Responding with coolness to questions about inheritance isn't cruelty, it's emotional intelligence. It means you're not giving up your peace just to satisfy someone's curiosity or expectations. Remember, your belongings are yours as long as you live, and your final decisions should rest in clear documents, not in offhand remarks. In this case, your silence is the best way to protect both your family and yourself. Number 4. Who do you vote for, or what religion do you follow? This isn't just casual curiosity. It's about two topics that cut like knives: politics and religion. In old age, after surviving family quarrels, dinner table arguments, and friendships broken over ideologies, the last thing you need is to be put in the position of either a flag to wave or an enemy to attack. Answering this question is like stepping onto a minefield. No matter what you say, someone will be ready to judge, criticize, or try to convert you. I saw this up close with two brothers, both elderly, who had gotten along for decades. All it took was one of them revealing his vote in an election, and the attacks began. They no longer talked about their grandchildren or their projects, only politics. Over time, their bond wore down to total silence. A brotherly friendship of more than 60 years destroyed by a simple, "I vote for," and the saddest part, their fight didn't change politics one bit, but it did leave them broken. The Stoics emphasized the discipline of language. Epictetus said, "We shouldn't talk about politics or religion with just anyone, because those topics often inflame the lowest passions instead of uplifting the spirit." The advice still holds true. Not everything you think needs to be shared, especially when you know the result will be conflict. I want to give you a practical tool I call the elegant redirection. It's about shifting the conversation with simple phrases without stepping into the arena. If someone asks, "So, who do you vote for?" you can say, "I believe everyone should decide according to their own conscience." If they push about your faith, what matters most isn't what I say, but how I live my spirituality. These responses don't open debates. They close them with dignity. Another useful technique is the inverted Socratic question. When someone tries to drag you into an argument, instead of answering, you turn it back with a thoughtful question. "And what do you think about how we treat others beyond political or religious labels?" That not only cuts the pressure, it also raises the level of the conversation. Remember, silence and coolness on these subjects aren't cowardice, they're wisdom. True faith and deep political convictions show in the way you treat others, not in a public declaration that can wreck relationships. And if someone keeps pressing, just smile, stay quiet, and think, "The peace I keep is worth more than the approval they demand." Number 5. Can you lend me money or co-sign for me? This is perhaps one of the most uncomfortable situations in later life. When someone close, even someone you love, asks you for money or suggests you co-sign their loan. At first glance, it may sound like a gesture of trust, as if they see you as solid, reliable, someone they believe in. But behind that request lies an invisible trap: the risk of losing not only the money, but also the relationship. I've seen this too many times. A woman I met in a study group once co-signed a loan for her nephew. He stopped paying, and the bank went straight after her. She lost her savings, her peace of mind, and worst of all, her relationship with that nephew. He vanished, and she was left with the burden. Ever since, whenever someone asks her for that kind of favor, she remembers the scar and replies coolly, "No, I can't." Her refusal isn't harshness, it's experience turned into wisdom. When you lend money, you step into 4 risks at once. The financial risk, because you may never see it again. The legal risk, because if you co-sign, you're the one responsible for the debt. The emotional risk, because the relationship gets poisoned by repayment expectations. And the reputational risk, because if you refuse, you're called selfish. But if you agree, you're later blamed for allowing it. It's a game where you always lose. Stoicism would tell you that what's at stake isn't the money, but your serenity. Seneca wrote that money can be a good servant, but is always a bad master. And when you say yes to these requests, you let money control you from the outside. Coolness here isn't cruelty. It's a wall of protection between you and someone else's chaos. There's a fable I like to tell, the borrowed barn. A farmer asked his neighbor to borrow his barn to store grain. The neighbor agreed, but when he wanted to use it again, the barn was full of mice and damp. It was never the same. That's what happens with loans. What you lend rarely comes back in the same condition. I recommend applying the 48-hour rule. Never say yes in the moment. If someone asks for money, take 2 days to think it over calmly. Those 2 days are enough for emotions to cool and reason to return. And in most cases, your answer will be a calm, firm no. If you ever decide to help, do it only with what you're willing to give as a gift, not as a loan. That way, you free yourself from expecting a repayment that may never come. And if you can't help, just say, "I'm sorry, I can't." Say it without long explanations, because every explanation opens a crack where manipulation can slip through. Remember that your resources at this stage of life aren't infinite, and your peace is worth far more than any signature on a contract or any bill handed out. Sometimes, saying no is the greatest act of self-love you can have. And believe me, in old age, protecting your tranquility is worth far more than pleasing anyone who comes knocking with a plea. Number 6. Where are you? Why didn't you come? Why didn't you answer? This is the question disguised as affection that actually hides a mechanism of control, and you know it well. It comes in the form of repeated calls, constant messages, or subtle reproaches like, "I worry about you." Of course, concern can be genuine, but when it turns into interrogation, it's no longer care, it's surveillance. Giving long explanations only feeds the idea that you must justify every minute of your life. I experienced this firsthand a few years ago. I had a friend who called me 3 times a day, always with the same phrase, "Where are you? Why didn't you answer sooner?" At first, I took it as affection, but soon I realized I was trapped in a web of demands. Every answer I gave became the starting point for the next criticism. That's when I understood. Giving unnecessary explanations is handing over your freedom on a silver platter. Stoicism reminds us that freedom is non-negotiable. Epictetus said that true slavery begins when we let others rule our minds, and that includes feeling obligated to report every move as if we were teenagers under the gaze of a strict parent. But at this stage of life, you've already proven who you are. You don't need permission to breathe. A very useful technique is the broken record. It means calmly repeating the same short phrase each time someone insists, "I can't today. Thanks for understanding." You don't give details. You don't open the door to more questions. You simply stay calm and keep your boundary clear. At first, it may seem cold, but over time, people learn that your autonomy is not up for negotiation. I also want to suggest a small exercise. Design your protective schedule. It's not a rigid timetable, but a list of moments you reserve just for yourself without explanation. It could be your morning walk, your nap, your reading time. Write it down, honor it, and when someone asks where you were, remember, you were living your life, not theirs. There's an anecdote I like to recall. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, spoke of how there will always be people who want to impose their opinion on what we should do. And he said something like, "If you want peace, let them have their judgment, and you yours." That phrase saved me from much guilt, because the point isn't to convince anyone that your absence was valid, but to accept that your time is yours, and you don't need to defend it. Number 7. What exactly happened with that mistake from the past? This is the question that reopens old scars under the guise of curiosity. And in old age, when you've already carried enough, The last thing you need is someone digging into your wounds to understand better. Sometimes it's family, sometimes friends who think they have a right to know your whole story, even the parts that hurt. But answering in detail only serves to rekindle guilt and put you back on the defendant's stand. I saw it in an older man who shared his experience with me. He made a financial mistake in his youth, a bad deal that affected the family. Decades later, there were still people asking, how exactly did that happen? He would shrink, give explanations, retell his shame, and in the end he was left with the bitter taste of never being allowed to move on. I realized with him that some stories shouldn't be retold to those who only want to feed their curiosity. Stoicism teaches amor fati, love your fate, even with its mistakes. It means looking back not to justify yourself, but to say, yes, that was part of my life, and because of it, I am who I am now. But that acceptance does not require you to account to everyone who asks. Life is not a public court, and you don't have to keep being judged for what you've already learned and overcome. A practical exercise you can do is write a letter to your past self. In it, you can acknowledge the mistake, thank yourself for the lesson, and make clear what changed in you because of that experience. That letter isn't for showing to others. It's for you to seal the chapter. When someone insists on the question, instead of going into detail, simply remember your letter and answer firmly. I've already worked through that, and I don't need to reopen it. That's how you protect yourself. I like the closed file metaphor. Imagine your life is a large library. Some books have already been read, underlined, and filed away. If someone insists on pulling them out again, you can calmly say, that file is closed. It's a short phrase, but a powerful one. It sets a clear boundary without starting a fight. I had to learn to apply this myself. At one point, I carried a romantic mistake that some kept bringing up. At first, I justified myself, gave explanations, almost apologizing again. Until one day I decided I wouldn't do it anymore, not because I denied the mistake, but because I had already turned it into learning. That day, I regained my dignity. Answer coldly when someone wants to know too much about your past, because that mistake already served its purpose. It taught you. Repeating it in front of others isn't healing, it's reliving. Close the file, stay silent, and remember, your story belongs to you, and you don't have to loan it out for anyone's entertainment or critique. Number 8. What do you think about so-and-so when they put you in the middle? Some questions look harmless, but are traps with a rug pulled underneath. Let me be clear. When someone asks you, what do you think about this? While placing you at the center of someone else's conflict, they're not looking for your wisdom. They're looking for a referee, and you don't have to accept that role. I've seen how, at family gatherings, a single question like that opens doors that are nearly impossible to close. Suddenly, you're the judge, the spokesperson, the executioner, or the peacemaker. And just like that, your name gets stuck to a story that was never yours. Can you imagine carrying the blame or responsibility for a fight that began long before you? Don't do it. In my experience, behind that question, there's almost always triangulation. Two people pushing from the sides, using a third to validate their version. It's an old dynamic. Family therapists call it triangulation, and it destroys trust because it turns the one who answers into a message instead of a person. I learned to recognize it one afternoon at a family lunch when, without asking for it, I was made the spokesperson in a quarrel between cousins. I tried to be fair, and in less than 10 minutes I regretted it. I was no longer Gabriel. I was the one who gave his opinion on the land issue, and the conversation dragged me into positions I didn't want to take. From that day on, I promised myself never to be the messenger or the judge of stories that didn't begin with me. Let me share a little tale I once heard in a mountain village. There was a messenger who, every time he delivered a letter, would open it and add his own opinion before handing it over. At first, people praised him for his clarity, but over time, villages split apart because of his comments, and no one knew anymore what the original letter actually said. One day, the messenger was left without work because no one wanted him to read for them. They preferred to read the letters themselves. The moral is simple. When you add an opinion that isn't yours, you create conflicts that don't belong to you. Learn to return the letter unopened, So what can you say in the moment without seeming unfriendly or being dragged into conflict? I use responses that protect peace. Short phrases that remind others of my boundaries, like, "I'm not in a position to judge that," or "I don't know all the facts, so I'd rather not give an opinion." You don't need long explanations. If you want, you can redirect the conversation towards something that does belong to you. I'd rather talk about how we treat each other when there's disagreement. Changing the subject isn't evasion, it's the responsibility of not letting your voice become a weapon in someone else's battle. Here's a visualization. Imagine a plaza with a fire in the center. Disputes are flames that burn, drawing people in to throw more wood. You can walk around the plaza, watch the fire, but choose not to throw wood. Being present doesn't mean feeding the fire. That image helped me many nights when I felt the urge to fix problems that weren't mine. Peace is preserved through small acts of coolness, returning questions, not taking sides, offering presence without taking on responsibilities that aren't yours. So I ask you, at your age, what would you rather carry? Someone else's fight or the calm of your own decisions? The answer isn't obvious for everyone because the heart may want to please, repair, or play hero. But wisdom is knowing when that desire forces you to lose your serenity. You're not insensitive for staying out of it. You're prudent. Hold your ground, protect your voice, and don't let anyone place you in the middle like a pawn. Your silence and your boundaries are acts of self-love that in time will protect not only your peace, but also the health of your relationships. Number 9. What's your PIN, your documents, or your passwords? This question is, plain and simple, a threat disguised as trust. Sometimes it comes from a close relative saying, "Give them to me just in case something happens." Other times from a supposed friend insisting you share your logins in case you forget. And most dangerously, it may come from strangers posing as technicians, banks, or institutions. The reality is simple. No one needs your passwords, and giving them away is like opening your front door and leaving the keys hanging within anyone's reach. Not long ago, a woman I met at a workshop told me how her own son, under the pretense of helping with online paperwork, ended up controlling her accounts. She trusted him so much that she handed over everything: cards, passwords, documents. The result was devastating. She lost money, but even worse, she lost trust. That betrayal cost her more than the bills themselves. What I learned from her story is that trust doesn't mean unrestricted access. It means respect for boundaries. Stoicism reminds us that protecting what depends on us is an act of virtue. And your passwords, your papers, your digital identity, those are fully within your control. If you give them away, you lose control, and with it, your freedom. Here, coldness isn't just necessary, it's a matter of survival. Let me suggest a verbal security checklist you can start using today. First, never share card numbers, passwords, or ID details over the phone, no matter how official the call sounds. Second, never send passwords in chats, not even family chats. Third, if someone insists, respond with a short phrase. "I don't share my passwords with anyone." That's it. No long explanations, because explanations only create room for pressure. Think of the double lock analogy. Imagine you have a safe with 2 locks. One is yours, and the other is kept by a notary or a trusted person in a formal context. That's very different from giving your key to anyone who asks. You can set up a family emergency protocol, where it's clear what documents exist, where they're stored, and under what conditions they can be accessed, but without revealing personal passwords. And yes, it must be said coldly. Even family must respect this boundary. Love is not measured by access to your accounts, but by mutual care. Saying no here is not distrust, it's wisdom. Remember, never answer this question, no matter how insistent the person may be. Your security is yours, and your peace depends on keeping those keys in your custody. In this case, silence and coldness aren't optional, they're an obligation of self-respect. Today, we've gone through 9 questions that may look innocent, but are really traps that threaten your peace, your dignity, and your freedom. We saw how simple curiosity about your money can turn into manipulation, how talking too much about your health can reduce you to a diagnosis, how conversations about inheritance, politics, or religion spark unnecessary fires, how loans, affection disguised as control, and questions about past mistakes steal your serenity, and how even in the most intimate matters, your passwords, your documents, cold silence is your best protection. The core lesson is clear. It's not about being distant or insensitive, it's about being prudent. In old age, your greatest wealth isn't what you show, but what you choose to keep. And when you learn to answer calmly and coolly to what doesn't deserve an explanation, you begin to live in true independence, the kind that comes from respecting yourself. Because inner peace isn't a gift from others. It's built daily through clear boundaries and wise silences. I want to thank you deeply for staying with me until the end of this talk. I'm Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden, a space created to walk with you through practical philosophy, spirituality, and the certainty that there is still time to live with fullness and dignity. Please write in the comments what country you're joining from. I'd love to see how far this community of truth seekers extends. And to seal what we've learned today, let me give you a phrase I'd like you to write in the comments. My silence is power. Because by keeping quiet about what doesn't belong to others, you lose nothing. On the contrary, you gain strength, respect, and freedom. I also invite you to share this video with a sister, a friend, or someone close. You never know when words like these may be the encouragement someone else needs right now. Thank you for being here. On your screen, you'll now see 2 more videos that I'm sure will interest you. Pick one and keep exploring how to bring wisdom into your life in a practical and serene way. Because this journey doesn't end here. Every day is a chance to live with more self-love, purpose, and courage.